I visited a Reformed church in New York City recently. The sermon was about the woman who anoints Jesus with very expensive perfume at the house of Simon the leper. The preacher explained that this woman, who turns out to be Mary, the sister of Lazarus and Martha, that she had given up something that had provided financial security for her. The alabaster jar full of this pure nard was worth more than a year's income. And so it was like a financial safety net for her. And the preacher went on to encourage us all to think about what we do with our resources, that we should allow this financial sacrifice Mary made to challenge us. And of course, that makes a whole lot of sense. I mean, she gave up her expensive nard, which provided security for her, in order to be a blessing to Jesus. Then we also should be willing to do some really sacrificial things with our finances in order to be a blessing to Jesus also. And anyway, Jesus did command his disciples not to accumulate wealth on earth, and he told us to sell possessions and give to the poor. And if anyone ever had the opportunity to give up expensive possessions or savings or things that provide financial security in order to bless Jesus, it would be wealthy Christians in a place like New York City. So this was encouraging to hear. I thought maybe the preacher is open to actually putting Jesus' words into practice. I mean, really, like the way they did in the New Testament. Maybe he's trying to move his people forward in this area, trying to give them a nudge in the right direction. So the church was having a picnic in Central Park after the service, and my friends and I decided to go. When we got there, the preacher was talking with a couple other people, and I went over and said hello. And eventually we got onto the topic of his sermon and the challenge that he had gently given all of us. So I began to talk about that financial sacrifice Mary had made and how that might apply to us. And as soon as I began to suggest that we should make similar sacrifices for Jesus, actually, like giving up things that provide us with financial security, it became clear to me that this was not something the preacher intended his people to actually do. As far as I could tell, it was like he was resisting me. And he began to talk about how patient God is with all of us. Sure, we may not make the kind of radical sacrifices that Mary made, but God is just so patient. And he then began to talk about the prophet Jonah and how patient God had been with Jonah in his disobedience. And it seemed like he was implying that it's okay for us to be unresponsive to God since he's so patient. Look how patient he was with Jonah. It's okay that we haven't really done much. And so I suggested that we might not find Jesus very patient if he comes back and sees that we haven't really listened to him, especially when it comes to the things he taught about greed. This is a really important issue to Jesus, and he's gracious, of course, but we need to do what he says. I mean, Mary actually did something. She didn't just think about how gracious God is and how patient God had been with her and then doesn't do anything about it. She went all in on this thing in response to the grace of God. But no, the preacher just spoke more about the patience of God. He didn't seem to be concerned about our response to Jesus or lack thereof, not in the slightest. And I could only conclude that his challenge to us must have been just lip service, just something that sounds cool in a sermon. I mean, he's got to say something in the sermon that at least encourages people to do something, or else it would be too soft of a message. But I don't know, maybe he had no intention that people would actually ante up and follow Mary's example, making those kinds of changes and sacrifices. And this is a theologically and culturally conservative church, by the way. They have men-only elders. They're very serious and uncompromising about issues like abortion and homosexuality, issues that will not really impact most of the people in the church, but unfortunately, they're very loose on issues like greed and other things Jesus talked about that would actually dramatically change the lives of many people in that church if they were taken seriously. And so I just thought, wow, this is a good example of this spiritual governor, a gospel message that has no real bite, a gospel message it's all about grace and patience, but it doesn't really get us to change our lives, because we're all just like Jonah. And I guess we just stay that way, according to the preacher I spoke to, if I didn't misunderstand him. We often ignore God or fail to respond to God, but he's so patient with us. Jesus paid it all. His grace covers all of our complacency and lack of obedience. God sees only the righteousness of Christ on us. And sanctification takes a really long time. And God is the one who does it. So just lay back, let God work on you in his time. He'll change you when he decides to. Monergism. Well, sanctification didn't seem nearly as slow of a process for the early Christians as it is for most Christians today in the churches that I've been a part of or that I've been around. Peter proclaimed to the people in Jerusalem that Jesus, the one they had recently crucified, is Lord and Messiah. And it says that they were cut to the heart and they said, "Brothers, what shall we do?" And then boom, next thing you know, they're all sharing their resources, selling property and possessions and helping the needy, sharing their homes. Boom, just like that. They turn right around. And there is no reason that cannot happen for us today. There's nothing keeping anyone from doing that kind of stuff for Jesus today. Most people just don't want to, or they don't think they need to for some reason or other. The problem, at least part of it, is this false gospel so many of us have believed. The message that is being preached in so many churches today, including many of the conservative churches, this message will never produce the kind of church that Jesus was able to produce, because it's not his message. If you would like to hear more about how Jesus said we need to respond in the area of wealth and resources, please check out the video above, and may God help us all to get back to what this thing was all about in the beginning.